Windows 11 has a trust problem. Microsoft is trying to earn back user trust by dialing back AI features no one wanted. That's right, they're finally acknowledging what users have been screaming about for years.
Microsoft has basically been systematically exerting dominance over its users to the point that you question now if your machine is yours or if it is Microsoft's and you're just paying for it.
Bill Gates is watching Windows 11 face one of the largest user rebellions the company has ever seen. And the backlash is growing louder by the day. Windows 11 adoption is sitting around 31%, even though Microsoft expected it to be at 50% by now, which means the rollout has stalled in a way the company clearly did not anticipate. Around 40% of Windows users are still on Windows 10 even after its end-of-life date, showing deep hesitation.
But in recent years, with the advent of Windows 11, I have to say that Microsoft has truly gone crazy. And the current direction of Windows 11 tells me that it is time for all of you to go.
Roughly 400 million devices continue running Windows 10 without support, which tells you that millions of people prefer staying on aging software instead of switching to Windows 11. That decision carries security risks, yet users are still making it. And that says more about their frustration than any marketing campaign ever could.
You are not a Microsoft slave. You own your device. Take your freedom back. Dump Windows, otherwise it will own you. Microsoft has plans for you, and you will not like those plans.
Desktop Linux usage has climbed from just over 3% to nearly 5% in a short span of months. And markets like this rarely shift that quickly without strong motivation. Enterprise Mac sales have jumped by more than 40% year over year, while Chromebook shipments to businesses have surged close to 90%, signaling that companies are actively exploring other ecosystems.
Windows President Pavan Davuluri admits that the company needs to improve Windows in ways that are meaningful for people.
Microsoft treated Windows 11 as a routine upgrade cycle, but the resistance turned into a measurable slowdown that cannot be ignored. Adoption charts are flattening instead of accelerating, and each quarter that passes without momentum adds more pressure to executives who promised a smooth transition.
The January 2026 updates have been a disaster. Shutdown bugs forced an emergency out-of-band update, then a second patch for OneDrive and Dropbox crashes. Some business PCs are failing to boot entirely after installing the January update. And beyond bugs, the core Windows experience has been, well, you've experienced it unless you've given up.
The hardware requirement became the flashpoint. Windows 11 demands TPM 2.0 support, and internal estimates indicated that more than half of Windows 10 machines did not meet that standard. Millions of computers, built between 2016 and 2019, were suddenly labeled incompatible despite functioning efficiently for everyday work.
Currently, still 40% of Windows users are still on Windows 10. Likely the main reason you have not updated to Windows 11 is because you cannot. Your old computer is considered junk now because it doesn't have this thing called a TPM chip.
Owners of powerful systems with modern processors and large memory configurations discovered they could not officially upgrade because of a missing security chip, and the recommended solution was to purchase new hardware. For households and small offices, that suggestion translated into thousands of dollars in replacement costs without any improvement in productivity.
Ads, bloatware, Edge and Bing pop-ups, OneDrive nagging you, forced Microsoft account requirements. Tom Warren, so this is the Verge reporter, says in 20 years of covering Windows, he's never seen fans of the OS disappear like they have recently.
There are documented methods to install Windows 11 on unsupported devices, and many users demonstrated stable performance after bypassing the checks. Microsoft responded by closing those loopholes in subsequent updates, reinforcing the perception that the restriction was strategic rather than technical.
Microsoft ID. I'm sure this irks a lot of people. Lately, it is extremely difficult to install Windows without a Microsoft ID. Basically, Microsoft wants you to log into them, just like Apple and Google requires you to ensure that the device is tied to an identity.
Small businesses felt the impact immediately. Offices that had invested in mid-range workstations only a few years ago faced potential refresh budgets in the tens of thousands. Even though their accounting software, design tools, and communication platforms were running smoothly. The upgrade path felt less like progress and more like a forced reset. The conversation shifted from performance to ownership. Windows 11 Home requires a Microsoft account during setup in most standard installations, and creating a local account has become increasingly complicated for average users. The installation process now assumes internet connectivity and identity linkage from the first boot.
Suddenly your screen freezes, your SSD vanishes from the file explorer, and when you reboot, precious files are corrupted, or worse, your drive is dead or gone entirely.
That account connects directly to OneDrive synchronization. Microsoft 365 subscriptions priced around $100 per year, and default integrations with Edge and Bing. Microsoft reported approximately $252 billion in revenue in fiscal year 2025, with more than half generated from cloud services, which highlights how central recurring subscriptions have become to the company's strategy.
Problem for Microsoft, and it's not just on the Windows side. This is actually way later in our notes, but Microsoft's gaming revenue is down 9%. Xbox hardware revenue is down 32%.
When an operating system functions as an entry point to cloud revenue streams, users begin to question whose interests shape product decisions. Advertisements appearing in system menus, storage upgrade prompts, and constant reminders to activate new features create the impression that the desktop has become a storefront. Microsoft's market valuation stands near $4 trillion, placing it among the most powerful corporations in the world. Yet the company appears determined to extract additional value from its installed base. That dynamic fuels skepticism among longtime customers who remember when Windows upgrades focused primarily on stability and compatibility.
Windows has been forcing us to use cloud services constantly with features like OneDrive to ensure that you keep your files on Microsoft servers, and now they're pushing the new Windows backup. There's the push for Office 365.
The result is a growing sense that Windows 11 serves a broader corporate agenda, rather than simply providing a dependable computing platform. Adoption metrics reflect that tension, and alternative systems are benefiting from the dissatisfaction. Users are comparing options, testing dual boot setups, or migrating entirely. And once that exploration begins at scale, it changes the competitive landscape. Microsoft built its dominance on ubiquity and flexibility. But the current trajectory has introduced friction at a moment when switching costs are lower than ever. What we are watching is not a minor product complaint, but a structural shift in user sentiment. And sentiment drives long-term platform loyalty more than any single feature ever could.
Microsoft ID and the constant battle to ensure that you have a computer free from a privacy-invading identifier. Or how Microsoft keeps forcing updates that you cannot turn off.
Let's talk about artificial intelligence, where Microsoft decided to gamble everything. The company invested $13 billion into OpenAI, and that investment did not sit quietly in the background. It showed up inside Windows 11 as Copilot, Recall, and AI integrations that users never specifically requested. Instead of releasing AI as an optional layer for enthusiasts, Microsoft embedded it into the operating system itself. Recall became the most controversial feature. The idea was simple on paper. Your system takes screenshots every few seconds, indexes them with AI, and lets you search your digital history using natural language. Microsoft described it as a productivity breakthrough. Security researchers described it as a privacy nightmare. Early demonstrations revealed that sensitive data could be stored locally in ways that exposed it to malware if a system was compromised.
I was probably going to laugh and talk about the fact that some people are having issues even booting into their system.
Microsoft paused the feature after Backlash, reworked it, and brought it back as opt-in with stronger encryption. That did not restore trust. Once people saw that their operating system was capable of building a searchable archive of everything on their screen, the psychological shift had already happened. Users began asking whether their computer was still a private workspace or a data engine feeding a broader AI ecosystem. Copilot integration spread into Word, Excel, Outlook, Paint, and system settings. It generated summaries, rewrote text, suggested formulas, and analyzed files. At the same time, Microsoft published warnings advising users not to rely on Copilot in Excel for tasks requiring strict accuracy because the model could hallucinate results. That contradiction raised eyebrows. Why embed AI deeply into productivity tools while cautioning users against trusting it with critical data?
Microsoft, if at any point you're looking back going, when did we go wrong? This was it.
The performance debate intensified frustration. Windows 11 was marketed as faster and more efficient than Windows 10. Independent benchmarks and user reports told a more complicated story. Some gaming tests showed frame rate reductions ranging from 5 to 10% on identical hardware after upgrading. Competitive players reported noticeable drops in responsiveness that affected gameplay consistency.
I want to know how long it took to figure out that you should improve Windows in ways that are meaningful for people.
Background services contribute to that perception. OneDrive synchronization, telemetry collection, Copilot processes, and additional UI layers consume memory and CPU cycles. Microsoft acknowledged that certain cloud syncing features can impact system performance under specific conditions. Optimization updates followed, yet the overall footprint of the operating system continued to expand compared to its predecessor.
To save your files to OneDrive is insane.
Oh, dude, what Windows was it when it started defaulting to a OneDrive folder for freaking everything? Or was it an Office update? I can't remember, but it drove me absolutely nuts.
Power users who rely on stable performance for development, video editing, or gaming began evaluating alternatives. Forums filled with side-by-side comparisons, tweak guides, and rollback tutorials. Some users disabled features to reclaim resources, while others decided that a clean migration to Linux or Mac OS required less effort than constant tuning.
Linux still doesn't deliver on-par performance with Windows across the board.
The update system added another layer of tension. Windows 11 enforces automatic updates with limited deferral windows. Organizations can delay deployments through enterprise tools, but home users face narrower options. Several high-profile updates in recent years have introduced bugs affecting boot configurations, drivers, and application compatibility. Each incident amplifies skepticism about Microsoft's quality control process.
I still have a hard time relating to not being able to tell that Windows 11 had a user focus problem.
Dual boot users encountered specific challenges. Updates occasionally reset bootloaders or modified partition settings, requiring manual repairs. BitLocker encryption, enabled by default on many new devices, ties drive access to secure boot states and TPPM verification. Disabling secure boot without suspending encryption can lock access to storage until recovery keys are entered. Those recovery keys are often stored within the associated Microsoft account.
And much of it likely is because the users cannot upgrade to Windows 11. Microsoft itself is blocking them. In order for many users to move to Windows 11, they have to buy newer computers. And the justification for this on the Microsoft side is twofold.
That chain of dependencies reinforces the perception that control is centralized. Secure boot validates operating systems using approved signing keys. Virtual machine users sometimes need to configure additional steps to run certain hypervisors without conflicts. Advanced users interpret these layers as protective from a security standpoint, yet they also recognize how deeply Microsoft integrates itself into firmware and identity systems.
And the second justification for Microsoft is to encourage more people to use Windows Copilot, which creates AI-capable computers. Again, a massive risk to privacy.
Trust erosion manifests in measurable behavior. Many users disable automatic updates despite warnings. IT departments deploy staged rollouts with extended testing periods. Businesses create backup systems to guard against unexpected downtime. These defensive practices signal that confidence in seamless updates has weakened.
When Microsoft began pushing this heavily in later updates of Windows 10 and now locked in Windows 11 for the most part, it was the first sign of a red flag. Microsoft became big all of a sudden again as a company once they moved their infrastructure to a cloud-based one. This has guaranteed the income stream to Microsoft and raised their position as the number 2 company in valuation.
Market share projections intensify the discussion. Windows historically maintained dominance well above 60% of desktop usage. Analysts now debate scenarios where combined Linux and macOS adoption could meaningfully narrow that gap over the next decade. Such forecasts depend on sustained dissatisfaction and improved alternatives. Yet current trends provide fuel for that speculation. Microsoft continues to highlight record cloud revenue, enterprise contracts, and AI innovation during earnings calls. Investors focus on growth in Azure and subscription services. Meanwhile, consumer sentiment around Windows 11 circulates across social media platforms, review channels, and technical communities. The contrast between financial performance and user frustration creates a narrative tension that is difficult to ignore.
He also says that engineers are now swarming to fix performance and reliability issues. And I mean, Luke, as someone who manages some developers, right? You know, developers. Do they like letting things rot and working on random bullshit that they know that nobody wants until finally someone from management pulls their head out of their rectal cavity and goes, maybe we should do what you guys probably knew we should do the whole time.
The core question centers on direction. Windows began as a flexible platform that adapted to diverse hardware and user preferences. Windows 11 reflects a strategy oriented toward cloud integration, identity linkage, and AI expansion. That strategy aligns with corporate revenue priorities. Whether it aligns with user expectations remains contested.
A separate Windows Central report reveals that Microsoft is actively walking back its AI push. Copilot buttons in Notepad and Paint. Actually, the login button in Paint was one that went kind of viral. I tweeted about that.
Backlash does not mean collapse. Microsoft possesses vast resources, engineering talent, and ecosystem influence. Yet platform loyalty depends on perception as much as capability. When users feel constrained rather than empowered, they reassess their options. Migration tools, cross-platform software, and web-based applications reduce barriers to switching. The situation resembles a crossroads rather than a conclusion. Microsoft can recalibrate by restoring choice, refining performance, and limiting intrusive defaults. It can also double down on integration and subscription expansion. The reaction to Windows 11 demonstrates that users are willing to push back when they sense imbalance. Ultimately, the story is not about a single feature or update. It is about ownership, control, and trust in the personal computing era. Windows shaped decades of digital life. The decisions made during this AI-driven transition will determine whether it remains the default environment or becomes one option among many in an increasingly competitive landscape.